everyone.
Good evening. My name is Jamie.
Tonight, I'm going to be talking about a very important topic, another very important topic. Why we should all switch to independent journalism. For at least the last 20 years or so, the mainstream media has been moving further and further in a partisan direction. Even looking at news from the left or the right does not give you a full picture of what's going on. You're still going to be subject to certain biases. But since the late 80s, there has been a significant movement of individuals who take it upon themselves to report the news. The advent of the internet has made this easier, more economic, and more logistically feasible. Some of them are even popular enough to compete directly with the mainstream media. These individuals I'm talking about are independent journalists. During this speech, I will be discussing why independent journalism is superior to mainstream journalism and why you should switch to watching it. But first things first, what is independent journalism? Well, independent journalism is basically any type of journalism that is not produced through a mainstream media corporation. And it's mostly associated with the online environment. But how is independent journalism different from the mainstream media, you might ask? But, well, unlike the mainstream media, which operates on a huge budget and has high-tech studios and thousands of employees, independent journalism is done by small groups of people and individuals who will operate on very small budgets and will produce videos and articles out of their bedroom. Also, unlike mainstream media, independent journalism is not subject to editorial guidelines. They can report on whatever they want. Now that we know what independent media is, I'll move on to the argument, starting with the problem with mainstream media. So the largest problem I see with mainstream media is conglomeration. Basically, a very small group of large corporations own all the major media outlets, and they operate the media outlets based on their corporate agendas. They're also very bureaucratic. They don't pay close enough attention to trends and the wants and needs of the viewers. And basically, as I mentioned in my last speech, there are three ways in which the mainstream media will attempt to influence society. First is deciding what will be talked about, what will not be talked about, by framing reality in a certain way, and by defining things in a certain way. This causes consensuses among society that are often based on opinions and subjective facts, or subjective ideas, sorry. So now we get to the crux of the argument. Why is independent journalism better? What are the advantages? Well, independent journalism is not hampered by the corporate bureaucracy, and their work is not editorialized to fit an agenda. Anyone with an internet connection can do it. All you have to do is be able to type up a blog post or upload a video to YouTube. Independent journalists tend to be more down to earth. They they tell the stories of the news from their own, from a more just on the level of their audience. And in my own personal experience, seeing the news debunked, the mainstream media debunked by independent journalists so often has encouraged me to be more active truth seeker. I will be more likely to be critical of what I see in the news than I see most people being. Though I feel that independent media is a godsend, we would be remiss in overlooking their faults. So basically, independent journalists are humans. They have their biases. They may have agendas. And those may find their way into their work. As many of them are very small operations, they have smaller budgets, and they're limited in the scope of what they can do, what they can cover, and the fact that they are not subjected to an editorial process is not always a good thing, because they can make mistakes. But fear not. There is a counter to all these problems. First of all, do your research. Before you commit to an independent journalist, look them up. Find out what their biases are and what agendas they might have, and see if that's something that you can accept. If one independent journalist isn't covering everything you want to see, find someone else who can pick up the slack. And hold your independent journalists to a standard of ethics. Independent journalists are very good about engaging with their audiences. If they find out from their audiences that they may have made a mistake, they will be. An ethical journalist will make a retraction. So, in conclusion, I would like to stress the importance of independent journalism. Independent journalism allows us a greater diversity of viewpoints and coverage, and allows us to see a much bigger picture than the mainstream media offers us. And they also give us more of an incentive to think objectively about situations, because there are so many of them, and you see that there's not one objective narrative or truth. They also allow us to play down the hyperbolic narratives we sometimes see going through society and whatnot. And regardless of who you are or what you do, we're all part of the democratic process. That means we need to be as close to the truth as possible. And I think independent journalism will help us get there. So, right now, I'm going to allow you all to field any questions you might have for me.
I think my question is when you talk about the mainstream media being left or right, I still don't really see. I mean, it's a human trait. It's not media. It's a human trait to be left or right. So I don't see how the independent journalist is going to be either any more. I don't know what the right term is, but they're also going to have that bias of left or right. So I don't know. I don't see how that really, whether they're independent journalists or mainstream journalists, how that really helps that process.
Well, so what you're asking is, how are independent journalists more objective?
Right.
Okay. Well, I'm not really saying that they specifically are more objective. It's just that they're regardless of whether they're left or right, one guy is not going to have the same exact opinions as another guy. even if they have even if they're both on the left, this guy might be closer to the center. This guy might be closer to the end of the spectrum, the other end of the left spectrum. So you really have the ability to see the difference there. But with the mainstream media, they're usually sort of the outlets. They usually sort of spread the same message. They don't really allow for a lot of dissent. So basically, I would say the best thing about it is you can look at the different left wing independent journalists, and you can see, so which part of the left do I really want to be on? Or if you look at the right wing main independent journalist, you can say, what part of the right do I want to be on? Or if, maybe you can look at both and you see which parts of your which parts of the left and the right that you want to adopt. It's much harder to do that by just watching Fox News and CNN, because you're basically, with Fox News, you're blasted with the entire party line of the right, and with CNN it's the entire party line of the left. So I mean, you don't really get that as much with independent journalism.
You're saying you get more of a what's the right term? Filtered message. You get a refined message. You don't just get the whole left or right. You get
Basically.
All right. Well, the independent journalists, where do they get their information?
Well, a lot of them they take their information from the mainstream media, and they'll comment on it. But a lot of others will actually just go to the scene of the news. Like, say there's a protest or there's a demonstration by a certain group, they'll go to the place where the group is meeting and talk to them. Some of them, like, those are the video reporters, but like some of them will find their sources elsewhere and write articles on it. Like they'll go on social media posts, whatnot. It's basically going to be a similar process to where the mainstream media gets their news.
I have one more question. What does hyperbolic mean?
Hyperbolic, like, have you ever heard of the word hyperbole? Like going overboard.
Okay.
Okay. I got a question. Don't you think that independent journalists,
Yeah.
media and all that, they have I've seen both. I used to watch CBS, okay, non-stop, 6 o'clock news, 6:30, that was it. And you really can't get much feedback because you have to research, like you said earlier. But the independent journalists, they have a tendency to bring up whatever. Take, for instance, Kavanaugh, the guy in the news nowadays, sexual advances towards women 36 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this independent reporter speaks up and sticks the microphone up in the guy's face. I have been raped, and you are saying you hate women. They have a tendency to get so involved with their own personal experiences and not Mr. Kavanaugh, what happened? What really happened? Am I right? You know what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. That's a very valid point. So this is actually another reason I very much support independent journalism, because a lot of times you have to differentiate between journalists and activists. Okay, many people who work as journalists, use their platforms as journalists to do activism, like the woman you mentioned.
She was a reporter.
Yeah, I mean, she was a reporter, but she was also an activist who was using her
Personal experience.
who was using her platform as a reporter to do her activism. So one thing I found is that a lot of times activists just get hired in the mainstream media, and you really don't get much of an opportunity to differentiate. But with mainstream media, with independent journalism, you have that opportunity. You can tell right away who's an activist, like by their behavior, and choose not to watch them.
Yeah. I have a suggestion. I think that our generation, Frank, Debbie, and myself, watch. I don't know what it's a platform, and they bring on guests, usually politicians, but they have other guests. And there's a woman that is
Hold on, is this gonna be long?
360.
Because
360 is the channel, and it's opinions. It's not the media. It's opinions of what they think and what they know.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot. That's a way of reporting the news, but
Right.
so I thank you all very much for listening.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
You're very
And
informative.
having this conversation with me.
Sure. Anytime.
Oh,